Welcome to Native News Online's Native Vote, Native Voice, the presidential debate commentary. And we just watched a good hour and a half plus of the first and maybe the only presidential debate between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. And we have with us tonight, we have two people on staff here at Native News Online. We have Marlon White Eagle, he's up in Wisconsin, former president of the Ho Chunk Nation. Welcome, Marlon. And Neely Bardwell over in East Lansing, Michigan. And I have two good friends, Aaron Payment, Dr. Aaron Payment up in Sault Ste. Marie. And we have OJ Siemens, who is the co-director, founder of Four Directions Native Vote, one of the country's best Native advocacy voting groups. And so, welcome all of you. Welcome to Native News Online's post-presidential debate commentary. And I think I'm going to just kind of start with some of the takeaways and who won and what your thoughts were. And let's start with you, Marlon.
For me, it was I would say it was a little bit of a contentious. It was kind of an awkward intro to both of them. They kind of walked and they sort of met over by Trump's lectern podium, and Vice President Harris introduced herself to him, and he really didn't kind of say anything back. So for me, that kind of set the stage for, the remainder of the debate, that, she seemed to be a little bit more in control, and he was sort of just, he's been to, 7 of these debates, presidential debates, and, he's relied heavily on his, the past debates. And, we're seeing now that Donald Trump is the politician, where before he was, the outsider, running for the presidency. So that was my takeaway. Yeah, I'll stop there.
And over to you, OJ. What are your thoughts?
Well, I was very happy that there was one adult in the room, and it wasn't former President Donald Trump. I mean, it was almost embarrassing. Actually watching it, I got so many texts and different things of people just getting up and walking away because they just couldn't tolerate the responses he was giving. And I was listening about Indian country, and the only thing that came close to Indian country was when he brought up KXL pipeline. He did it twice, and it was kind of like the dog whistle saying that drill, 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 in Indian country, look out. So, but yeah, I was just glad there was one adult in the room at that time.
Neely, what were your thoughts over in Lansing?
Well, I did watch the whole thing, but I do think Kamala Harris did a very good job of keeping her cool, especially when there were some misinformation shared about some of the things that she and President Biden have done so far. She also did a very good job of conveying her message in a way that hopefully will reach some supporters of Donald Trump who maybe were on the fence. This debate was a chance for both candidates to really convince the American public about why we should vote for them. And I think Harris did a very good job of really stating her platform. She had her work cut out for her in terms of really defining her stance on fracking, as it has been pointed out that she has been a little bit flip-floppy on that. As far as Donald Trump goes, he is one to really speak from his heart and really just say anything that's on his mind. His campaign must have really prepared with him because he did a decent job of staying on track, although there were some points where it was hard to remember what the question even was. Aaron?
Yes, can you hear me?
Aaron, you get the cleanup on this one.
All right. So first, I want to share with everybody that's listening. So I come to the table with over 32 years with the Michigan Political Leadership Program, which is a nonpartisan training for good policy over bad politics. And I've done instruction in that program for 30 years straight for other future leaders, including our current governor and our Secretary of State in the state of Michigan, who are traded on tribal sovereignty by me. I'm a political scientist over 23 plus years in tribal elected office. We have a lot at stake in this election, and it does matter who's president and the impact on Indian country. Also, former first vice president of the National Congress of American Indians. So for me, I went into this watching for a couple of rhetorical questions. Do we know Kamala Harris better after the debate tonight? Did Trump reinforce what we already know him to be? Did he make up any ground? What is their cogency score? How did they do? And we can talk about that a little bit later. Who do we feel safe with the nuclear codes? Which candidate do we feel safe and stable with the nuclear codes? And then what is the impact on the battleground states? And just like my friend OJ, who instigated a lot of focus on Indian country in the 2020 election and making us on the forefront of candidates and knowing that they do have to have a platform as it relates to American Indians. In the battleground states, we are multiples more people, Indian people are, of the proportion of the total population than right now what the polls suggest how this election is going to be won. And so American Indians are the deciding factor in this election. We're only 2 or 4% of the total population in the United States, but we are multiples greater than the margin of victory in the polls right now. And so they need to pay attention.
And interesting enough, Aaron, if I may interrupt, interesting enough, the swing states, by coincidence, are where many of the states that OJ, your organization 4 or 5 years ago identified to me as being those states where a Native American vote can really make a difference. The Native vote can make the difference. And was it 6 of the 7 swing states? And it's kind of hard to figure out what's the swing state now. These polls are so tight, and there's more avenues there than there were even a month ago in terms of what is a swing state, I guess. And so, Aaron, what's your response to that?
I would say that the only battleground state right now that is not likely to be impacted by the American Indian vote is probably Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
But North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, I still put Minnesota there, although I think the red team is kind of written off Minnesota. Arizona is going to be tight. The number of American Indians in Arizona as a proportion of the total population is 14%. And the election was won by less than 0.5% the last time. That's why the Arizona Republican legislature enacted a citizenship requirement. So all those American Indians that belong to members of tribes in Arizona are going to have to prove their citizenship, which is ironic on the 100th anniversary of the American Citizenship Act being enacted. That is clearly a voter suppression by the Republicans to try to lower the Native American vote. But American Indians, if they vote, and if they vote in their own interest, and I'll be nonpartisan on this, will vote in their own interest, and that will have an impact, and we are likely to determine the outcome of this election.
Yes, and OJ, can you...
Oh, he went muted.
You disappeared there, Levi.
It doesn't say he's muted. Oh, OJ, just could you elaborate? Oh,
Here I'm back. We have a little technical problems, guys. It's late. But listen, OJ, tag along with what Aaron was talking about, because you're the one that brought it to me, and both of you have been good sources for Native news online through the years. So you guys have the expertise. So before we go back to our staff, I want to hear what you have to say about that, where Native people really have the capability to make a difference, and why it's important for Native people to vote.
Well, first of all, I want to say me and Aaron, way back in 2018, 2019, 2020, we worked really closely together because we saw the importance of this. And we are talking numbers in sometimes less than 1%, sometimes 2 to 3%. And then you have the polls that go, you can go 5%, either way. But what worries me, first of all, is the fact that Vice President Harris, I think, really did a wonderful job tonight in her presentation and try to be the adult in the room. What worries me, though, is Natives not coming out to vote. I mean, we have the numbers, and I know there's voter suppression going on. I mean, we filed so many lawsuits that, I'm a Sioux, so I guess that's why I did it. But we need to really get the message out there of getting Natives to vote. And again, just like Aaron said, we're nonpartisan, but we need to ensure that this message, that it gets repeated over and over by every organization, by every Native newspaper. That is an imperative that you get out there and vote. Find a way. If organizations are there, find a way to get them. It's just that important. And we're not the only vote, but the thing is, we are the ones that can make that final decision within that 2 to 3% or 5% error. You were talking about it. We back in 2020 called it 7 states, 77 electoral votes, and the 7th generation. And the 7th generation is really going to come out, I hope, and just show us the way, us old people, how to get there.
Levi, if I could add.
Yes.
So for everybody watching, I just finished up a stint, and we're looking at proceeding with the National Congress of American Indians as their national campaign manager. And there are resources available for tribes right now. So everybody that's watching this, go to nativevote.org, and NCAI is giving mini grants out to tribes to mobilize people to vote. And I want to be clear, it's nonpartisan. We believe, though, that when American Indian people vote and they vote in their own interest, that will have a certain outcome, but we won't say what that is. But there is resources for mini grants that can do direct mailing. It could do advertising. It can tie into the young people. One of the funniest ads that I've seen in T-shirts was "Snag the Vote," which I think might capture some young people's votes. There are resources at NCAI to be able to help your tribal nation to motivate your people to get out to vote.
Well, then let's move this forward. Both campaigns went in purposely with a purpose tonight, right? That's why they showed up. There's some question if both parties were going to show up, and mainly was Donald Trump going to show up. He showed up. But the Harris campaign, according to reports, wanted to lay out a clear path, a plan, and a vision for a Harris administration. Do you think Vice President Harris moved the needle on that tonight? Given the circumstances of President Biden withdrawing, and she became the nominee in record fashion, a lot of people just clearly don't know about who she is, and that's been they wanted to purposely get her acquainted to American people who may not have watched the Democratic National Convention. Do you think she accomplished that tonight, Marlon, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think she hit on it pretty well throughout the night. There was one point where she kept repeating, I have a plan, I have a plan, I have a plan. So you heard her, emphasizing the plan. And
she mentioned the $50,000 to small businesses, $25,000 tax credit for new first-time home buyers, and on and on. And so, Neely, what do you think? Did she move the needle?
One could really hope that, she did a very good job of stating a clear plan for the future. She did a good job of stating her stance on fracking. I mean, that's what the debate is typically used for, is to make clear to the American public who you are and what you stand for and what you plan to do. And I think for Vice President Harris, she did just that. She, like you said, pointed out the things that, her administration has done alongside President Joe Biden, and the things that she plans to do for the future. I think Donald Trump tried to do that. He did say certain things that he wants to do when he gets in office, even stating that he'll do it before he even gets to office. So he's clearly very eager to make some changes should he win the presidency once more. But unfortunately, it really seems that most of the time when he says he has a plan, he never really says what that plan is. And this especially comes with in regards to the Affordable Care Act. I mean, that's been for a long time something that has been definitely closely observed and definitely criticized, both validly and some incorrectly. But either way, the Republicans have said for a long time now that they want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. They want to make it better. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a comprehensive plan put forward on how that's going to happen.
9 years.
So once again, like I said, Donald Trump, although he does say certain things he wants to do, he doesn't say how he's going to do it, and I think that's where he comes up a little bit short in comparison to Vice President Harris.
Now, the Trump campaign, on the other hand, were trying to keep their candidate somewhat restrained, right? And to stay away from the personal insults and focus on policy. How do you think Donald Trump did tonight, OJ?
I think he bombed. First of all, what I want to throw out there is I don't know what's going on with the GOP. Basically, you have the South Dakota governor shooting dogs, and you have Donald Trump saying people are eating dogs. I mean, it must be a dog world, because that's what he talked about most tonight.
And he accused Kamala Harris of getting rid of Joe Biden like a dog. So he must be they're fixated on dogs. So.
Yeah, one shoots them, the other one says people are eating them. So I mean, that's the main thing I got out of the debate tonight from the GOP.
Yeah, and they're actually sending Governor Kristi Noem, the dog killer, down to Savannah this week to hold a town meeting. We got a email earlier today from the Trump campaign. Aaron, how do you think the candidate Trump did tonight, former president, in terms of fulfilling the wishes of his campaign?
Well, first I would say he seemed anesthetized at the beginning of it. To be honest, when the question comes up, are you better off 4 years ago? 4 years later, and Vice President Harris got into some specifics, tax cuts, small business incentives, and then reference to Trump tax. And his response to that first was to talk about tariffs. And for somebody who gets greater points on the economy, he failed that question miserably, because I had econ as an undergrad. And what I do understand with tariffs is when tariffs come into play, it might put a burden on the company that's selling and importing, but that cost is shared by the consumer. And that's where there's going to be a 20% tax across all goods and services as a result of those tariffs. And so he failed that question pretty miserably. So I would say that whenever she seemed to have the higher ground or to be able to make the solid and rational points, he reverted to racist tropes, immigrant tropes, make no mistake, everybody listening to this broadcast is either American Indian and indigenous to this country, or your first generation, second generation, third generation, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th generation. And we certainly didn't punch your green card when you came here. And so everybody's an immigrant. And the fact that we choose to single out brown people, immigrants, as somehow dirty and criminals, and just his characterizations. He did that on that. He did that a number of times across different issues. He reverts to these tropes that are dog whistles to get his base riled up. So he did 100% on that. He did an excellent job with keeping his base of supporters exactly where he needs them. But that's not who's going to decide this vote, because he doesn't climb over 47% of the vote with his base. And where I think he's in danger is with the independents and with Republican women, because I think that Kamala Harris made some significant ground on going directly after him for eliminating Roe v. Wade. Now, a lot of Indian people are in rural communities and where a lot of people are still having the effects of missionary impacts and pro-life as a result of that. But when it comes down to a woman's private choice and her decision, including her choice to pull that lever, she gets to do that in private. And I think that a number of Republican women are going to vote in their own interest in this election. So I think that he solidified his base, but I think he lost significantly on trying to pick up independents or white suburban women.
Okay, and we actually have a special guest who is going to join us, and it's Judith LeBlanc, who is here. Neela, can you let her into the room here?
Hey, Judith.
Hello, relatives. Good
Hello,
evening.
Judith. She's from the Native Organizers Alliance, and she is a friend of ours as well. And welcome, Judith. You watched the debate. Tell us your thoughts now that you're on.
Well, I hope I'm not going to cover, and I think I probably will, some of the same points of my relatives who've been on the program. Hi, OJ.
Hello.
Hey, Aaron. Good to see you all. Well, let's put it this way. Trump did not gain any new voters, and it's clear what their strategy is: to feed meat to their base, their far-right anti-democratic base. I think that the open and total flailing approach to programmatic and policy issues was clear, and that his mainstay was trying to divide people, especially based on race. You know, it's very interesting when Vice President Harris was detailing uh, the role and the way that President Trump has used racism. I was waiting for that other shoe to drop. You know, she talked about being a slumlord and racial discrimination in housing, in the housing complexes that he owned. She talked about that full page ad around the Central Park boys, young men who were falsely accused and imprisoned, and how he called for their execution. But what she didn't bring up was the 1993 testimony before Congress, where he attacked us when
Oh,
he
yeah.
was when he was fighting the casino that was going to be built in Connecticut. And his basic line of attack is Indians, they don't look like Indians to me. And, you know, so this kind of trail of racism is something that he's grown accustomed to using because it can work. It can work because of the dominant narrative that affects our people, affects our ability to achieve sovereignty, and deeply affects whether or not we can have a democracy in this country, a real inclusive multiracial democracy.
Well, Judith, I want to ask you a question because your organization sent out a press release earlier today. It's still Tuesday, right? Yeah, and really, the focus was a need to bring to attention on the presidential campaign Native American issues. Now, we didn't hear anything about Native Americans tonight, and OJ brought up the good point. But close as he came was he mentioned the Keystone Pipeline, which we opposed, and Joe Biden, by executive order, as I recall, second, third day in office, removed. And but talk to us about that and your sentiments of how we can get Native issues elevated to the point where presidential candidates can really address some of the issues that impact Indian country. And I'm going to ask you, Judith, and then I'm going to go to Aaron and then OJ on this one.
Well, we conducted a survey in partnership with Illuminative. We've done 3 cycles of a survey called the Indigenous Futures Survey. It's the only Native survey of Native people. We've surveyed over 16,000 people. And in the last cycle, where over 6,000, no, 8,650 participants. The top three issues, no matter what size, shape, age, urban, res, the top three issues were sovereignty, climate change, and economic security. And so the way that these candidates are going to respond to those concerns in Indian country, it starts at the grassroots. And Aaron is right. We have to build a momentum and a movement at the grassroots on reservations and in urban areas, because as Jackie DeLeon from the Native American Rights Fund has said repeatedly, the stakes are high in this election, but the margins are very narrow. And when you look at the impact that the Native vote had in 2020, then what it means is that we've got to do even more this time around to engage grassroots people in putting the questions to all candidates from top to bottom, to taking it to all candidates. What is their stance on sovereignty? What is their stance on the need for government intervention on climate crisis? What is their stance on investing in Indian country? We have to do it in an organized way, though, and the starting point is on our territories, where we face tremendous challenges to the right to vote, to equal access to the ballot, to the vote. But we also have to do it in narrative work. And I think the work that you're doing, Levi, is very important in giving voice to what the people need and want. Because the Biden administration, they faced tremendous pressure right in the transition period. The Transition Committee, Native Organizers Alliance and Illuminative helped to mobilize a circle of people, including National Congress of American Indians, and got over 200 tribes to press the transition team, and tens of thousands of people who signed a petition to nominate Deb Haaland to be the Secretary of Department Interior, and then mobilized
That's huge. That was
40,000
huge.
letters.
That was huge.
40,000 letters to the Senate for her confirmation.
Mhm.
So they heard us because we turned out in large numbers. They heard us and responded because they knew they owed the grassroots, they owed tribal nations the respect. So we have to start at the grassroots. Native Organizers Alliance is putting 200 moccasins on the ground in 11 states. The majority of them are so-called battleground states, and they're being hosted by tribes and Native groups who know their communities. They know who their relatives are, and they're trusted messengers. So we have to get that work not only going, but it has to be loud, bold, and very public and visible.
And I loved how she said moccasins. She didn't say boots on the ground. She said moccasins. So, Aaron, I know you want to say something, so go ahead.
Yeah.
Then we'll go to OJ.
First of all, it's such an honor to be on calls with my heroes, OJ and Judith. We hear a lot of talk about African American women being solid mobilizers, and it's 100% true. But put an Indian auntie behind the project, and you end up with the Secretary of Interior, the first American Indian woman Secretary of Interior. If anything, people get anything out of this call tonight, we are the margin of victory. Candidates cannot ignore the Indian vote any longer. And I don't care who you are or how long you've been around, you got to have a platform that relates to American Indian. Clean carcieri fix, mandatory funding, full funding, eliminating the means test on Medicaid expansion for American Indians. We have a special treatment in the ACA, but we still have to prove that we're income eligible, and we should not have to. We don't have to do that for IHS. We should have IHS portability, just like the VA has portability for healthcare. It's a treaty right. It should not be based on if you're a poor Indian, on whether or not the treaty right is honored. And then Indian education choice. And that's going to sound kind of middle of the road. People might wonder what my partisanship review is, but public education is failing miserably for American Indians. We still have the worst high school graduation rate and the worst college graduation rate out of any racial ethnic group. Health, education, and social welfare. Education is in the middle of that forever promise because of the 2 billion acres that were ceded that's owed to us. And so the public education is not meeting the objective. Some of the tribal grant schools under the BIA are really good. We need many, many more choice so that we can fund our own schools. Because if we do our own education, it's going to be better than public education. And then finally, every American Indian, every tribal council leader should go back, or citizens should ask their council, how much are we going to lose under the ACA if Donald Trump is elected? Because my tribe, since the ACA was implemented, has gone from about $3 million a year in third-party revenue to $30 million a year. Our annual funding agreement from IHS is $30 million. We now make more in third-party revenue under the ACA than we do under the annual funding agreement. And if Trump becomes elected, he's pledging to eliminate the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion. We will lose 50% of our healthcare revenue if that happens. And so he's promising some kind of plan that he keeps saying either in 2 weeks, he's working on a beautiful plan, a very beautiful plan in 2 weeks. Well, it's been 9 years later since he made that promise. He doesn't have a plan. His plan is clear. When somebody shows you who they are, believe them the first time. His plan is to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and he's not going to replace it with anything. So each American Indian, ask your tribal council, how much do we stand to lose if the Affordable Care Act is repealed? One final thing. In the first few days of his election, I was first vice president of the National Congress of American Indians. His proposal was to cut 35% cuts across the board to American Indian country budgets. That's not made up. Fortunately, we had friends in the Republican Senate that promised us the president proposes, Congress disposes. It was like saying, ignore the drunk uncle in the room, okay? Because we're going to protect you. But if he aligns the president and the Senate, we're in danger. 35% across the board.
Now, Aaron, we are all of us have taken the oath, so to speak, of being nonpartisan. Tell me this. Now, you've done some field work for NCAI this year. It's past summer. Get out the vote. I watched a webinar. It was really well done 2 or 3 weeks ago. But what was that term Larry Wright has talked about in terms of the tribal ticket, or what's the term? Why don't you explain that?
It ties perfectly in with what Judy was just saying, Judith. It's the tribal sovereignty ticket. And, Indian country supports, this is going to sound a little strange, but they support Senator Mark Wayne Mullins, because even though ideologically he is as far apart from some issues for Indian country, but on key issues of IHS, improving IHS, he's right where we need him to be. And also Tom Cole is the co-chair of the Native Caucus. So American Indians have to be neither D for Democrat or R for Republican, but I for Indian. They have to vote in their own interest, and that's the tribal sovereignty ticket. We borrowed that from Jefferson Keel, by the way, former lieutenant governor of the Chickasaw Nation. And the tribal sovereignty ticket is recognizing the treaty and trust obligation and supporting candidates, whether they're Republican or Democrat, that support Indian country. And so I'm asking everybody to be nonpartisan, to research your candidates carefully. Ask your candidates the question, what is your position on full funding? What is your position on the Affordable Care Act? What is your position on education choice for Indian country? That's a tough question for Democrats to answer because they're very careful about the unions, right? But ask those questions in a nonpartisan way, and then weigh it all out, and then what's in the best interest for you today and for the next 7 generations into the future.
And I think before I go to OJ, what I do like about what you're saying, Aaron, is in terms of working in a bipartisan fashion, give some thought to what you're doing, folks. I mean, sometimes people just seems like they're like helpless sheep that follow the leader or follow the cult because he's the leader or she says this. And I think that can't emphasize enough. Looking for that tribal sovereignty ticket is just really key. Where are the candidates on Native American issues? And over to you, OJ.
Oh, all right. Thanks. And really, it's really been interesting hearing everybody. And I agree with everybody 100%. I've said for years and years, if you go to a rally where it's campaigning for president and vice president, you'll hear about housing, you'll hear about infrastructure, you'll hear about education, you'll hear about law enforcement, but none of that covers Indian country. They do not cover our status as nations. They don't understand the sovereignty and the treaty issues. And so it's always a learning process, or us teaching them what needs to, what they need to know. When we did these candidate forums, and by the way, we're doing candidate forums this week. We're in Las Vegas. We're bringing candidates in that are elected and that are seeking office to talk to tribal leaders to understand what tribal sovereignty and treaties are, what tribal issues are. And we're going to be doing this in Las Vegas. We're going to do it in Phoenix. We're going to have 3 days over there, and we're going to do it in Wisconsin. But people have to understand what they're lacking as far as their knowledge in Indian country. When we do these forums, we don't do it as an "I got you" moment. We do it as an educational moment to educate them and make them our friends in Congress. A couple of years during midterms, we had one candidate kept on looking at us and referring to us as "you people," and nobody got angry, but we had to, talk to him and say, no, you're the "you people. We're the Indians here," or, we're fighting like a CNN, something else.
Yeah.
We're always on being the forefront of saying we're here, we're still not gone. When we were talking about how important it is, Montana's not even mentioned in all of this. And there is a real tight race there where that Senate seat can decide who is controlling the U.S. Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And the one candidate made some very racial remarks about Native Americans and drinking. The other candidate has actually really fought for Indian country. So what we did for directions, we went over there and we went around and we were looking for workers. And so we were able, within a matter of days, gather 1,500 names, cell phone numbers from different communities and different reservations that now we're going to be able to use as a job recruitment. So then we went to Arizona. It was like 3 hours, and we got like 2,500 names and cell phone numbers of workers that we can hire.
Moccasins on the ground, OJ.
That's right. Well, and here's the deal: we've hired before in Arizona over 1,500 people. I mean, in Montana, in Wisconsin, and so we know about moccasins on the ground. I always say, people wear different hats. Well, I wear different feathers, and I'm also the executive director of Coalition of Large Tribes. So we also use our tribes, tribal leaders, to bring them into these conversations. As an example, in Nevada here, the Intertribal Council of Nevada is coming to this to talk to candidates, and then we're bringing in tribal leaders from the Colt tribes to participate in this.
And that's a coalition of large tribes. So
yes,
people
so
who
it's not
don't know what that
means. Coalition of large tribes. So it's not just one tribe. You go to Arizona, you have the Arizona tribes, you have the Coalition of Large Tribes. You're going to have the Intertribal Council of Nevada going there. We're working with Wisconsin, the Great Lakes Intertribal Chairman's is our council. And so when we have that, you're going to have tribes from California, you're going to have tribes from Nevada, you're going to have tribes from Arizona. And it's, even though it's for the Senate or the House or the president in these different states, what it is showing them that all of these people have a decision when it comes to our treaties and our sovereignty. And we need all the tribes from all over the country joining together to get that message out.
Well,
And
Jay, I just
sure.
let me interrupt you because I want to move on. Please, because it's the this is coming up this weekend in Las Vegas. Tell us where people can go, particularly those in Las Vegas, where they could be. And is it the University of Las Vegas, as I understand it?
Yes, we have teamed up with the University of Las Vegas, and we actually are using the law center there and using the native students and native programs in order to do it. So it's a moot courtroom at the law center there in Las Vegas at UNLV. You can go to Four Directions. We have a page there. It's a in our Facebook, and we have a front page where it will have not only where it's going to be at, the agenda, but it'll also give you an option. So if you can't make it, you can actually, if you're a tribal leader or from different tribes, you can join virtually. And if you're a tribal leader, you can join virtually and participate in the overall meetings with the candidates. And we have candidates coming, we have elected officials coming. So, I mean, it's again, it's an educational piece that we're using to, again, once again, start that spark that's going to light the fire for the 2024 elections.
And to our viewers, you are watching a special episode of what we do here at Native News Online, and we're calling this one Native Vote, Native Voice, Presidential Debate Commentary. And so we're happy to bring that to you tonight. And let's move forward. Judith, let's talk let's talk about what candidates, and you already mentioned some of the issues, the tribal sovereignty, but how do you think we can really get them to do what we want them to do? And I keep going back to that. I know we kind of covered this, but you know, they didn't even mention us tonight. And you know, you could blame it on ABC, the commentators, the moderators, I should say. But really, what do we need to do to get their attention?
Well, I think first we have to start from the perspective that elections do not solve our problems. Elections are not going to solve the problems that have taken many, many decades, hundreds of years to develop. But what election results do is to create the conditions in which we organize, in which we bring about and press the federal government and local governments to do what is needed in our communities. So elections don't solve problems, they change the conditions. And so I think what we need in Indian country are specifics. You know, in 2020, when we did the Indigenous Futures surveys, 87% of those who planned on voting in 2020 said they studied the platform or the voting record of a candidate. Very, very educated electorate. We obviously and clearly need to do more to register people and to continue the education process. But what we need from candidates is action, specifics. Under the Biden administration, Biden-Harris administration, we have seen tremendous structural reforms. Everything from co-management with tribes, co-management of land and resources and water, over 70 agreements. We've seen many sacred sites protected through federal action. We know that some of those sacred sites have been, you know, the protection was needed because of climate change and the impact on those sacred sites, poor and reckless for-profit development, and fossil fuel extractive industries destroying our sacred places. But we've come a long way under the Biden-Harris administration. We've also seen a native in the executive branch of the government, a native directing the Department of Interior, the most important department for us, which affects our daily lives. A lot of people don't realize that we're the only peoples in the same department as animals. And so often we are
Wow.
fighting for a budget that's being divided between protecting a species that may go extinct and our health, our education, our land management. So I think under the Biden-Harris administration, we have seen that there is a real push for us to have access to all the different departments. So there were 80 natives appointed to this administration, record high.
Record high, yes.
We need pledges from these candidates that they will double. They will put 160 natives into the various departments. The reason why I say that is that we've had access to have conversations and consultations because natives are around the table in the federal government. And so when our tribal governments go to those departments around concerns, there is someone there who will advocate and make it possible for us to have a seat at the table when decisions are being made about energy, about natural resources, about education, healthcare. So, and in the Department of Justice. So I think what we need to do is to pressure for starting now, doubling the number, a commitment and pressure for a commitment to double the number of natives that are appointed, pressure and a commitment to putting yet another Indian in the executive branch, and that we want to go further on consultation to make it not only a good idea or an executive order recommending it for every department, but making it mandated. We want it to be a matter of federal law that tribes must be a part of a public consultation process where we have a say as to what happens on our lands, with our water, and with our civil rights.
And Aaron, to you, I'm not so sure we could expect a president to always select somebody to head the Department of the Interior. And that's where the Bureau of Indian Affairs is. It makes sense. Indian Affairs is there. But are there qualified candidates out there that could head up other departments like the Department of Transportation? Sharice Davis comes to mind. Did she work there at one time when she was? What's your thoughts on that? Are we boxing ourselves in, or how should Native people really approach this?
So I agree with Judy. I think it's 2 times what we have now, or maybe 4 times would be better, representation across the administration. I'm ready to be Secretary of Education. I got the education.
you have all the degrees.
Several, yeah. But so I want to say something real quick because I don't know if my uncle will be watching, but my uncle is a Trump supporter. I won't say his name, but I got a little eager earlier because some of us follow the policy issues really, really closely, and there is a difference. So what I'm trying to get across is not partisan. It's who represents and who will represent American Indian interests. And so under the CARES Act, so you know who was president then, we got less than 0.2% in the CARES Act to help us through the worst of the worst worldwide pandemic, right? Under the Rescue Act, we fought for 4%, but we got 2%. We got 2% of the total. So we got 10 times more in the Rescue Act than we did in the CARES Act. In the Jobs and Infrastructure Act, so this does affect us, even though the debate didn't specifically address American Indians, we got over $50 billion at a record amount. We got more money in one piece of legislation than we had in 20 or 30 years previously. And the person who cast the tie-breaking vote was Kamala Harris. And there were no Republicans that voted for that. So I don't mean to be partisan, but there is a partisan impact on the policy issues. And then one final thing I wanted to say, so I don't forget to say it, is an earlier question asked, who do you want to be in charge of the nuclear codes? Who do you feel safer with the nuclear codes? When push comes to shove and you get in a heated debate and you default to a crazy allegation that immigrants are eating our cats and dogs, is that who you want to be this close to the trigger? It's just total nonsense. And the Trump campaign did a really good job of somehow subduing, whether it was through meditation or through drugs or what, I don't know, but some job of subduing Donald Trump. But when it got to that and he lost his control, it's going to be more of the same. And I don't want somebody who has access to the nuclear codes that's going to make up a statement that immigrants are eating our cats and dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And OJ, I want to go over to you, and I'm going to start with you, but I really want Judith to clean up on this issue, and that deals with the women's right to choose. So, what are you hearing in Indian country about that issue?
Well, I think a lot of people forget we were actually federal law was created in the 70s, the HIDES Act, that would not allow us to have federal fundings for women to do that. Now they had exceptions in which if there was rape, the life or safety of the mother, or there was exceptions in it, but you couldn't use federal money for an abortion. And I always tell people, keep an eye on Indian country, because if they pass a law on us, they're just practicing to try it on. And look at it, it took them 30 years.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, they basically turned around and what they practice on Indian country, they turned around and did it to the rest of the United States. But it depends on who you talk to. But I can tell you, 99.999 is the fact that everyone supports a woman's right to choose, and it's just a given. It's not even a law. It's our culture, it's our tradition for allowing or for supporting our women's right, regardless of what it is. It's our culture to support them. And then I want to jump back real quick to touch on what Aaron said. If you listen to Trump, he would take and try to answer Vice President Harris, and he would forget what she said. And he would go, well, I'm answering to whatever she just said. I mean, he totally lost his attention span, and he just didn't get it. And the only other thing I want to do to talk about what Aaron said, during his administration, there was no fee into trust. Everything stopped in Indian country. And so if we had to go through that for 4 years, we will probably have to go through that again another 4 years. And so, I'm not saying it's good, bad, or otherwise, but what I'm saying is tribal members need to remember that to make a decision. If they don't want us to grow our land and go into, fee to trust, fine, you know who to vote for. But if you want to take and expand our reservation and extend our land, then you also know who to vote for. So sorry about that.
Vote tribal sovereignty ticket, right?
Right.
That's the mantra this year.
I covered everything except what you asked me. See, I could be.
That's okay. That's all right. Judith talked about women's right to choose.
Well, OJ got it right. We've never had the right to choose. Family separation has been the policy of this government from first contact, carried on through slavery, and has continued through the boarding school era and the stealing of our children. We've never had the right to choose bodily sovereignty, to really to maintain and develop our families, which are at the center of intertribal cultures. And we are a little bit different. We bring medicine because of our values into the political arena. But on this issue, we are the same as the majority of people. Over 60% in this country, no matter what their political perspective is, supports bodily sovereignty, the right for women to choose. But, one of the things that gets lost in this discussion is that it is a big issue for us because we also have been denied the right to native traditional birthing. We're working with a group of native doctors, nurses, midwives, and doulas to
Mhm.
put together for the first time ever a national network of Native birth workers so that we can have a national approach to ensuring that our women, no matter on the res or in an urban environment, have the right to traditional practices in the birthing process.
Mhm.
Now, one of those things that stands in the way is government funding. And in Minnesota and in Washington State, Native women, Native birth workers have been able to get laws passed, bipartisan support for reimbursement by Medicaid for traditional births, for support for all those things, and that because Native doulas and midwives are being reimbursed for their services at the same rate as other midwives. So that means our women can participate in hospitals or at home births and get reimbursed by Medicaid. Because you
Mhm.
know as well as I do, there's no romance without finance. You can't do things solely out of good intention. You have to be able to make it possible for Native birth workers to play their role in our communities. So we believe, we know that a majority of our people support the right to choose, but the majority of our women should also have the right to birth with our traditional ways, and for that to be recognized not only by the medical establishment, but by that funding stream from the federal government, because healthcare is a treaty right, but in the end, it's a human right.
It's a human right. You're exactly right. And Aaron, I want to pivot a little bit off of this woman's right to choose, but I want to um, talk about that get out the vote effort, the NCAI, because you were doing that and you had a great webinar. I participated. Um, Actually went on as an observer, and then you called me out, asked me a question. But talk about what NCAI is doing this year. It might be a little different from what they've done in years past. To get those, as Judith called it, I love that. I'm gonna borrow that, Judith. I may attribute it to you, I may not, depending on the circumstance. But
We're
moccasins on the
relatives.
yeah,
We're
your relatives,
relatives.
moccasins on the ground. So tell us what NCAI is doing, Aaron. And then I'm gonna go to you, OJ. Are you on mute? Aaron, you are on mute. Guess we'll go. Let's go to OJ. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Aaron. Sorry, guys. OJ, tell me, are there any known areas that we are concerned? You have done such fantastic work in the past combating voter suppression, along with NARF, the Native American Rights Fund. Are there any hot spots that we need to be concerned about this year?
Anyone in Indian country. I mean, you've seen they're preparing. They're going to be flooding, especially people of color, those polling places in order to try to do any type of intimidation that they can. And what we've been telling tribes is that we all have exclusionary laws within our reservations, one way or another, or bad man clause. But if a person is insulting or is intimidating an elder, um, there's nothing stopping us from calling the tribal police and escorting out of the polling place. We can also file for exclusion, but we have to be prepared because they're not going to let this go down, because we know that we're within that margin of winning or losing. They know.
Mm-hmm.
So I see Aaron's back, and I really want to hear about NCEI giving us all this money.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Are you up on the res? I heard you one time on a stream saying, "Hey, the reality of broadband on reservations is real, guys." So,
Well, I'll say real quickly, and then I'll answer your question. And again, we're trying to be issue driven, not partisan driven. Immediately after the election, Vice President Harris reached out to me directly and asked me to help construct the tribal broadband plan for the nation, the $1 billion. And we met for about an hour, and then we met for another hour. And the plan that we put out was like 99% the plan that NCAI put forward on her behalf. And we had identified that we needed 5 billion. So we got the 1 billion, then we got another 2 billion in the Jobs and Infrastructure Act for broadband. And so, you know, there's a demonstration of policy and follow through for Indian country. Just one other thing real quick is Arizona was won by, again, 0.2%. And the population of American Indians in Arizona is about 14%. And so I don't think it's a mistake that the Republican legislature passed a citizen test in Arizona. And I said at the top of the hour that, you know, we're in the 100th anniversary of American Indian citizenship, and the Navajo and the Hopi are having to prove that they're American. And so that seems to feel like retribution for how people voted in the 2020 election. So NCAI is nonpartisan. And a lot of work has been put in our foundation, NCAI Foundation, and our executive director and chief of staff to go out and find funds to support efforts like the ones that Judy's talking about, also to push funds out into Indian country to partner with Illuminative and take that next step to really hit the issues, but also to educate the population of Indian people about what is in your best interest in a nonpartisan way. What are the platforms? What should you be pushing? But then also to push money out to tribal nations. So it's a very easy application. Everybody listening to this call, just go to nativevote.org, click on mini grants, and then send that information off to your tribal leadership. They can apply for grants to get 5,000, 10,000, to do direct mail, to do advertising. If you like t-shirts, a lot of people like t-shirts, to mobilize people to get out to vote, to help support and fund some get to the vote efforts. Like 1 year we did casino buses down to bring them down to vote. So if you need some resources for that, the application was made very straightforward. It's very easy to fill out. You just put your name and your information. And if you don't quite know what it is you want, NCAI will meet with you and say, okay, well, what about this? Or what about this? Or how about this? And I would say your chances of being funded are probably 99%, because they'll help you to write the proposal so that they can fund it. So NCAI is very eager to get those applications. They want to push all the money out, and they want Indians to vote in record counts.
But 9 weeks out. So, and I think our good friend OJ, we're going to bid you good night. And I understand you need to leave, but thank you, Chi Miigwech, to you for coming. And we'll talk to you soon. And I will see you at the your forum this week. So, we're looking forward to seeing you, OJ.
All right. Well, Wopiline, we chose any Woki. You know, thank you very much. I always pray for your health and help. And Aaron, one thing, if you can I would extend that grant period a little bit longer. I've been getting calls from tribes all over, and I direct them there, but some of them think that they're already too late. So if there's a way to get
Aaron,
that up there.
Excuse me for interrupting, but for your forums, OJ, Native News Online will do a story. We're going to do that one tomorrow. And Aaron, if you get me something over, I can get that out, and we can push that on Native News Online and all of our social media links. So that's really important that gets out. And to our viewers out there, you know, sometimes we get overlooked, and you know, we get 7 million people come to us a year. So we're not the small boys anymore, but we're not New York Times, but you know, in Indian country, we are well read. So please share the information that we put out about voting and election. And we are trying to do it in a nonpartisan fashion as much as we possibly can. So commentary is a little different. So we covered that really well. So who else is there? It looks like I lost my crowd. Where are we? There we are. Judith is still here. Aaron is still here. This program had me fooled for a second. Neely, are you back? And Marlene, well, I want to talk about the fact checking. I understand you've been doing a little work about fact checking. Are we okay? And to our viewers, you're watching a special coverage of the post-presidential debate. We are calling it here at Native News, Native Vote, Native Voice Presidential Debate Commentary. And Neely, are you ready to talk about fact checking? who told the truth tonight?
Yes, of course, Levi.
And was Marlon joining us or not? And Judith and Aaron, you can just pipe in when you want to on this. This is kind of a, you know how we Native people are. We just get in the circle and we just talk. So
Yes.
tell us about it, Neely.
So tonight we will be doing our fact checking. This is not sponsored, but it is run by PolitiFact, which is a nonpartisan organization that fact checks all candidates, basically everything that a politician says. So yes, it is time to fact check. So one of the biggest things that Trump was touching on tonight, as everyone assumed, was immigration. So Trump, as we lightly discussed earlier, made a claim that in Springfield, Ohio, that immigrants are stealing neighbors' pets to eat and kill. However, it was said during the debate that a city spokesperson, I believe it was a city councilor, told PolitiFact and ABC that those facts and those claims were unfounded, and there have been no reports. So they aren't sure where Trump made that claim. Another one goes into, as we know, this is a common statement that Trump has been making at rallies, at basically different media presences that he does. This idea of executing babies after they are born as a form of abortion care, which again is not true as well. Terminating a newborn's life after they are born is infanticide and is illegal in every U.S. state. Something that he often gets confused with that is third trimester abortions, which are extremely rare and make up around 1% of, less than 1% of abortions carried out in America. So once again, those are a few different lies. Marlon,
It's typically, excuse me for interrupting, but it's typically a woman's life is highly in danger at that point. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's why I've always understood it to be that. Yeah.
Yes. That is usually done as a last resort case of emergency, and that is always mostly done with families who want the child. So this statement that this is happening at an alarming rate needs to be addressed just isn't true. Marlon, did you have any fact checks that you would like to share?
Before you switch over, can I mention on the issue of abortion? So this is a very sensitive topic for Indian country. There's a legacy of missionary impacts in our communities, and a lot of our people in rural communities have some Christian views when it comes to abortion. But the one thing that I wanted to make clear was the inconsistency when what Trump is saying. So on one hand, Trump is claiming, and he's bragging about how he killed Roe v. Wade. Okay, and here's the thing: when we're talking about life, we shouldn't be using terms like killing Roe v. Wade. Okay, so he brags about killing Roe v. Wade. And then he says, so the backdrop is somebody got to him and said, okay, be careful how you say that now. You really need to be saying that we're moving this back to states' rights. Now, remember when states had preeminent right, brown people couldn't vote. And so we want some federal protections because we can't leave it to the local conflicts that American Indian people had. And so when he was asked about in cases of rape and incest, he claims to support abortion in certain conditions in rape and incest. Okay, but he still says he supports states' decision. So in 20 states, there's a broad Trump abortion bans, including in cases of rape and incest. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say that you're bragging about eliminating Roe v. Wade and giving it off to the states and saying that you support certain exemptions when those states are passing no exemptions. And so, that leads you to believe that if there was a federal proposed abortion ban, that he would have to follow his constituents. And that's where you saw the vacillating back and forth about his personal view of how he's going to vote in Florida. And then, maybe he does personally believe. It's hard to know what he believes because he's been pro-life, he's been pro-choice, he's been punish the mother, put the mother in jail, put the doctors in jail, and so I think you got to really look closely at what he's saying when he's saying, "Oh, it's just a matter of states' rights," and for Indian country, for sure, when it's left up to states or local governments. That's who was denying us our rights. That's who took our land, expropriated our land. And I never want us to be left to the dominion of states. We're elevated above states in the U.S. Constitution. And so states
That's a great point. That's a great
are
point.
at the
Say
expense.
it again, Aaron, because I like that.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
States'
Yeah.
rights are often at the expense of American Indian sovereignty.
Mm-hmm. And they don't always understand us, depending on the governor. I've noticed that here in the
Or
state
they
of Michigan.
understand us. They just take it like Kristi Noem. She's barred from all the reservations in her state.
Yeah. Okay. Martin, back to you.
Yeah, I was just looking through my notes here, and one of the fact check was the violent crime is down, and I think Trump just sort of interjected as it came out, with he was saying that they didn't include states with the most crime, but I'm certain that the violent crime is down currently under the Biden-Harris administration. Uh, the other one that I had was in regard to he said it's called weaponization, and it's in reference to the lawsuits against the former president. And he said the DA of New York was, directed by President Biden. I think, he said these cases were fake cases.
Yeah.
And
well, let me respond to that. And one thing that boggles my mind in terms of if Joe Biden was really weaponizing the Justice Department just for political reasons, any good father would not have allowed, if he was interfering with the Justice Department, would not have allowed his son to get prosecuted. Now his son is, he had gone in, did a deal. A Trump lawyer or a judge said, "Hey, I'm not happy with this plea deal," because the special prosecutor had a plea deal. It was on the table. They went in to confirm it over a year ago. Then all of a sudden they brought these charges, and now young Biden Hunter is going to go to jail in all probability, and Biden has said he will not pardon him. And so that kind of just, to me, kind of debunks the whole theory that Biden's there with the strings on the Justice Department, because what good father would let that happen? And I think that's something that is bothering Joe Biden as we speak. I mean, who wouldn't? What father wants their son to go to jail, especially when you try to be an outstanding citizen? And so with that, one other thing, and I didn't come up during the debate, but Donald Trump has been saying in recent weeks, and I've heard him say it 2 or 3 times at a couple rallies recently, that you send your kids to school and they come home, they have an operation and they're a different sex. And I may not say exactly how he says it, but that's not true. It's not. There's no school in America performing operations on children.
Well, of course not. I think that that comment is representative of a larger perspective of what a lot of Americans view gender affirming care as. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the United States currently view gender affirming care as radical, or as taboo, or as something that shouldn't be discussed, or something that should be banned. Unfortunately, because of their narratives against gender affirming care, they have allowed themselves to peddle lies, like you just said, that students are going to school and coming back a different gender. They have had transitional surgeries. When really the facts are, when it comes to gender affirming care, that parents and doctors are heavily involved in the process, especially when it's an adolescent. that is looking into gender affirming care. And once again, it is a very comprehensive process that deals with parents, the child, the parent, the doctors as well. And the biggest part, and that ties into the women's right to choose, is the fact that the government should not have a hand in citizens' healthcare or bodily choices when it comes to their own bodily autonomy.
Well, one thing, and the reason we're doing this fact checking part, and we honestly, we'd be here all night, and we don't have all night if we really went through every last falsehood that was told tonight. I guess, in fairness to Donald Trump, what did you two find out? What are the fact checkers saying about Harris? Was the vice president basically
Yes.
honest, or was she getting some of those big noses, the Pinocchio noses as well?
Well, for the most part, Vice President Harris was speaking factually. There was a little bit of overinflation of some data. For example, she said that Trump left Biden and her with the worst job and unemployment rate since the Great Depression, which is only partially true. The rate did drop very much during 2020.
Just like your sign just did.
Yeah, unfortunately, it did come down. But like I said, the rate did drop or did increase briefly during 2020. Everybody knows the COVID pandemic was detrimental to communities across the nation. But then it, increased as they transitioned Biden into the presidency. Another thing that was pointed out is Kamala Harris's view on fracking. In 2019, when she was running for president, she came out against fracking. And tonight and previously, we have seen her recently flip her decision. And I wanted to ask the group of here is, what does Indian country think about Kamala Harris's decision to support fracking instead of like she previously did, which was to ban it?
So
Why don't we start with Aaron?
yeah, so I have a good answer for this one, all right? So I've been a candidate for council, I've been a candidate for chairperson and back to council. And when you ideologically run on a campaign of what you want to happen, and you get elected and you get the lay of the land and to understand what the budget is, you understand what the conditions are. We have the most affirmative, and I won't say liberal, but I'll say affirmative plan for transitioning to clean energy, which is something we have to do. But we also have people that have jobs, and transitioning means trying to find new opportunities for people and generations that can continue and fulfill the work that they've been trained to do for many, many years. And so it's not an easy thing. And I know, some of my friends that are very liberal that would like to see an immediate change. When you get into office and you have to balance out all the interests and also balance out the reality of what that looks like, things become very different. So the long-term impact is that dependence on fossil fuels will be eliminated. And we see investments in this administration on clean energy like we've never seen before. There's money sitting on the table right now, so much money that tribes have not been able to completely access it. And so there's efforts to try to push those dollars out. So I would say that we're a mixed bag when it comes to Indian country, because there's a number of tribes that are in certain territories that are they're considered energy tribes. And I respect their sovereignty to make their decision in what's right for them and the transition that what's right for them. And that means a transition. I hope it all means a transition, but whether that's 5 years, 10 years, 50 years down the way, a lot of tribes that are energy tribes are recognizing the federal government doesn't even scratch the surface of their need in fulfilling the treaty and trust obligation. And so it's not for me, even though I am liberal when it comes to the environment, to tell another tribe that you have to get rid of the money that you're making right now and that you're not getting from the federal government. So I think that once you get elected, you see things in a different perspective because you have an insight that you didn't previously have. And so when she says that she has the same values, I think it's just tempered with implementation in the reality of the lay of the land. So
And Judith, one of the reasons we did this fact checking, and I guess I, for one, as a Native person and as an American, and we are dual citizens, I'm tired of all this misinformation and it seemingly that certain parties get to, when I say that, not necessarily political parties, but certain individuals get to just constantly lie and give out so much misinformation without the national media checking them on it. Why is it important for people to hear the truth? Why is it important?
I'm sorry, I don't have a mute button.
Well,
Come on.
I
Yeah.
I don't think facts necessarily win the day. And that's what we're seeing with the rise of the anti-democratic movement in this country. If facts could win the day, no one would smoke cigarettes or drive drunk. They just wouldn't if facts could win the day. And what we're seeing with this anti-democratic movement, which, numbers in the millions, none of us in our lifetime have experienced a situation where there is a mass movement of millions who have diametrically opposed values to ours. And it is why we have to be prepared for the long term. Like our voter engagement work, the work we're doing with the Native Organizers Alliance, organizing fellows with tribes and Native groups in organizing and mobilizing in communities. The runway is really 2030, because by 2030, we have to have our community so engaged and tuned into policies and the role of government, local, national, and tribal government in our lives, that they will readily participate in the 2030 census. Because the 2030 census is the foundation to greater Native representation in government. And I think, facts are important. But like Vine Deloria said, our great thinker,
Mhm.
you have to weave, you can't put Western knowledge above traditional knowledge, traditional indigenous knowledge, nor can we make the mistake of prioritizing traditional knowledge over Western knowledge. We have to weave it together. So fact checking is important, and we have to be able to challenge the misinformation. And we also have to lead with our values and try to help people think based on their own experience, practice-based evidence. Our people have deep understanding, our origin stories, and the way that we have our great thinkers and medicine people have leaned into trying to protect our cultures, our languages, our sovereignty. They've done it based on practice-based evidence. It's not like, oh, I have a brilliant idea, like Lincoln ended slavery. No, he did not. Over 100 years, slaves organized, allies outside of the system of slavery organized, and there was a building economic narrative and an economic reality that caused slavery to become outmoded. And Lincoln saw that and also saw the need to shift the focus to stealing our land, so-called westward expansion. I give that long ass example to say that we have to be 360-degree aware. There are facts, there is our belief systems, and we have to see how everything is in relationship and moving. And then we can address the disinformation.
Well,
Facts, our belief system, and seeing how all things are in relationship and impacting on one another.
we're Native News Online. We're going to do some podcasts during this election season, so I'm going to invite both of you two, and probably OJ as well. We could, this is great. We could go all night. Marlene, we have time for one more fact check, and then we're going to
Okay.
close this down. And then I want Judith to talk a little bit about the native vote, and then we'll wrap it up. And Aaron, you'll have some last words as well. So go ahead, Marlene.
Okay, the one that fact checking on Harris, she said that Trump inherited 100 or 400 million on a silver platter and 6 times filed for bankruptcy. The fact was, it was reported by the New York Times that in 2018 calculations,
Dollars?
it was
Yeah.
the dollars were it was 413 million,
Mm.
and then the 6 times was actually 7 times that Trump had filed for bankruptcy.
So
So-
she was
those are the
she was
two.
a little off, but she was accurate.
So
Yeah,
unfortunately,
yeah.
413 million is still more money than most of us will ever see in our lifetime.
That's true. I can
So
speak
while
for
the
this.
fact
I'll
may
speak for this
be,
bottle of me, man. That's very true.
so while the fact may be technically false, let's just say it's still
Accurate.
accurate.
She gave him grace by giving him actually the benefit of the doubt a little bit.
Hey, Judith, tell us about nativevote.com, and then I'm going to go to Aaron and we'll close this down.
Sounds good. We are partnering with Illuminative to expand the electorate. So we are working with several tribes and many Native organizations in 11 states to host fellows, people they choose in their community who we're paying $20 an hour for 20 hours a week to do voter registration, voter education events, and then getting out the vote and being prepared to protect the results. We are probably not going to know the results of this election on election night because the anti-democratic forces have put people into county positions all over the country, not just in Georgia. They've been purging the voting rolls already. So we have to have a community that is well organized to defend the vote as it was cast. So we have a long-term agenda, 200 moccasins on the ground in 11 states, working with tribes and organizations. Doesn't sound big, but what we're doing is in the course of this outreach and voter registration, we are mending the van. That is the voting files. We are not represented in those voting files and therefore are not included in the ongoing electoral and political arena. So we're trying something that's never been tried before. We are pushing driving people entering natives and registered natives into the van so that we can continue to prove our significance, our political significance in the elections. So it's the Native Organizers Alliance organizing fellows. Get in contact with us if you are in Arizona, Nevada, Montana, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Washington State, or Alaska. And I'm missing one, North Carolina. And if you'd like to work with a tribe or an organization and want to sign up for the program, please do so. Nativesvote.com.
Thank you so much. Chimi wish you, Judith LeBlanc, and you do a wonderful job there at Native Organizers Alliance. Aaron, tell us the last word from your perspective. What was the biggest takeaway from tonight? This has been fun, actually.
Yeah, I would say, first I want to say, Judith just recognized our good friend, Vine Deloyer Jr. as one of our great thinkers, but Judy is one of our great thinkers and advocates. And so
Amen.
I appreciate the work that you do. And so one of the things that I take very personally, I'm mixed. I'm half white and I'm half American Indian. And this constant racial trope and always defaulting, the profound insecurity of somebody that has to see Black women as nasty, and saying that she turned Black, reducing her to a caricature. I liked her response to that, which was, I live in a mixed community and we're neighbors and we care about each other. We care about each other's welfare. And it's time for us to move forward, not backwards, when it comes to racial harmony And, this has been used as a dog whistle for the last 12 years, almost 12 years, since the birther argument. And it's time for us to move past that so that we see the humanity in each other and that we see past whatever your beliefs are about another person. I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to those times, the good old days when we couldn't vote, when we were not allowed to vote, when we didn't graduate from high school.
Well, when America was great. Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to go back. I'm not
Okay.
going back. I'm going forward.
And thank you so much. And Chi Miigwech and Judith, we're going to do this again on October 1st. That's when the vice presidential debate is. Are you willing to come back?
I sure am.
What about
And
you,
willing
Aaron?
to promote it as well.
Okay,
If-
wonderful.
If
Wonderful.
Judy's coming back, I'm coming back.
All right,
There you go.
We'll assemble this team again, and we'll be back. And I just think it's needful, and we do know that there's still some apathy in Indian country when it comes to participating. As I have been told, why are you participating in the white man's election? My standard answer is, I'm a dual citizen. And if I'm going to pay taxes in the white man's system, I'm certainly going to vote in the white man's system.
Right.
So,
Yes.
and plus, it's too much is at stake when it comes to, we know this, too much is at stake when it comes to Native American issues and some of the things you talked about, Judith, tribal sovereignty, water rights, all those things that we know are just critical to progress for Native Americans. And to our viewers, on behalf of Native News Online, we will be back on October 1st with another presidential commentary, but it'll be the vice presidents, and it'll be Tim Walz versus J.D. Vance, and who's the Republican. And I will say this, and I borrowed this from when I was at the Democratic Convention's Native Caucus, a vote for Kamala Harris, a vote for Tim Walz is a vote for Peggy Flanagan, who will become the first Native American governor of a state. And she is the current lieutenant governor up in Minnesota. So I'll leave that with you. And Neely, what do you have to say good night to everybody?
Well, I just wanted to say miigwech for the viewers for coming so late at night, especially if you're on the Eastern Seaboard. But most of all, I want to remind our viewers to register to vote if you haven't already. But also, if you can, early vote. And remember, and if you can't early vote, remember to vote on Election Day in November. At Native News Online, we are committed to bringing you non-biased, non-partisan election coverage. And this presidential debate commentary was just one effort we are doing. So if you guys are interested in seeing what more Native News Online staff is doing to cover this election, please go to nativenewsonline.com. And we do have a Native Vote 2024 section. Once again, miigwech for joining us. Marlon, do you have any final thoughts?
Just that, here in Wisconsin, we're about a week away from early voting. So I'm really excited to cast my ballot and, sit back and, watch everything go by,
And I understand there's going to be some couple of rallies up there. I think the Potawatomi put it on one, and I think the Oneida Nation tied with MAST, right? The Midwest Alliance of Sovereign Nations and Tribes, I should say, MAST. And I will try to be up there for at least one of those and come up. I'm in Grand Rapids. I'll swing around the lake and go up there and give that support. So, and to our viewers, Chi Miigwech for staying up late with us. And what we're doing is actually as dual citizens, and I mentioned that I'm a proud citizen of the Prairie Man Potawatomi Nation, and everyone else. We're proud citizens of our respective tribal nations, but we're also Americans. We are proud citizens of the United States, and it's our land that our ancestors took care of, and it's our responsibility to be participants in modern day philosophy, or politics. So here we are, and we'll see you next time. Chi Miigwech.